The rain in Sector 4 didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. It was a heavy, acidic downpour that kept most honest citizens inside their hab blocks. But Ronin didn't mind the rain. In fact, he preferred it. It kept the diner quiet, and quiet was the only luxury Ronin could afford these days. He wiped down the counter of the rusty spoon for the 10th time that hour. The diner wasn't much, a converted shipping container on the edge of the industrial district, sandwiched between a fusion coil repair shop and a scrapyard. But inside, it smelled of roasted garlic, seared meat, and fresh bread, a smell that didn't belong in a place like this. Ronin was a man built like a mountain, with shoulders that strained the fabric of his worn gray shirt and hands that looked like they could crush stone. His face was a map of old scars and deep lines, usually hidden behind a thick graying beard. He looked like a man you crossed the street to avoid. But if you looked closely at his eyes, you wouldn't see violence. You would see a deep, tired sadness. He was just about to flip the sign to closed when he heard it. Tap, tap. Tap, it was barely a sound. Just a rhythmic, hesitant scratching against the metal door. Ronin paused, his hand hovering over the lock. Customers didn't knock like that. Customers in Sector 4 kicked the door open or shouted. This was different. He pulled the heavy lever, and the door hissed open, sliding into the wall. At first, he saw nothing but the rain and the neon reflection on the wet pavement. Then, he looked down. There, shivering in the deluge, were three figures. They were small, children clearly, but they weren't human. Their skin was a pale, translucent violet, shimmering faintly under the streetlights. They wore rags that looked like they had been pulled from a trash compactor, soaking wet and clinging to their frail frames. The tallest one, a girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old in Earth years, stepped forward. Her large dark eyes were wide with terror, but she stood protectively in front of the other two. No credits, she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. Please, just warmth. Ronin looked at them. He looked at the way their ribs pressed against their skin. The way the smallest one was swaying, barely able to stay upright. In Sector 4, kindness was usually a trap. It was a weakness that got you killed. Ronin stepped back. Get inside, he grunted, his voice rough like gravel. Before the acid rain burns your skin. Before we see how a simple bowl of soup changed the fate of the entire galaxy. Do me a quick favor. Scroll down and leave a hi in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from. It helps the channel more than you know. Now, let's get back to the story. The children shuffled in, their eyes darting around the diner as if expecting a trap. They huddled in the corner booth, far away from the counter, trying to make themselves invisible. Ronin didn't ask questions. He didn't ask where their parents were, or why three Lyrian children, a species known for their high-status diplomatic roles, were wandering the slums of a human colony. He just turned to his stove. He pulled out a heavy iron skillet. He threw in a knob of synthetic butter, letting it sizzle and pop. Then came the chopped onions, the protein cubes, and the precious real potatoes he had traded a week's earnings for. The smell wafted through the diner. He heard the children's stomachs rumble, a loud, desperate sound in the quiet room. He ladled the thick, hearty stew into 3 ceramic bowls. He cut 3 thick slices of bread, toasted them on the grill until they were golden brown, and placed them on a tray. He walked over to the booth. The children flinched as his massive shadow fell over them. The smallest one hid his face in the older girl's rags. Eat, Ronin said gently, placing the tray down. It's hot. The girl looked at the food, then at Ronin. Her eyes were filled with confusion. Why? She asked softly. Ronin shrugged, wiping his hands on his apron. Because you're hungry. That's enough reason. For a second, nobody moved. Then, hunger won. The children attacked the food. They didn't eat with manners. They ate with the desperation of starving animals. They scooped the stew with the bread, licking their fingers, tears mixing with the rain still dripping from their faces. Ronin went back to the counter and pretended to clean a glass, giving them privacy. But he watched them in the reflection of the window. He saw the color returning to their violet cheeks. He saw the smallest one stop shaking. When they were finished, the girl stood up. She walked to the counter, her head bowed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, jagged piece of blue glass. It was trash, polished by the rain, but she held it out like a diamond. Payment, she said, her voice steadying. Ronin looked at the glass, then at the girl. He reached out with his scarred hand and gently took it. Accepted, Ronin said solemnly. This covers tomorrow's meal too. Come back at noon. The girl looked up, shocked. Tomorrow? If you're hungry tomorrow, you come here, Ronin said. Name's Ronin. I am Alara, she whispered. These are my brothers, Kale and Jory. Nice to meet you, Alara, Ronin said. Now go, stay out of the alleys. They left as quickly as they had arrived, disappearing into the rainy night. Ronin stared at the piece of blue glass in his hand. He placed it on the shelf behind the register, right next to his old military dog tags. He didn't know it yet, but he had just started a war. The routine continued for 2 weeks. Every day at noon, Alara, Kale, and Jory would slip through the back door of the diner. And every day, Ronin had a meal ready. He learned about them. He learned that Lyrians couldn't digest heavy spices, so he adjusted his recipes. He learned that Jory, the youngest, loved sweet things, so Ronin started baking fruit tarts with synthesized sugar. He learned that they were running from the Gray Men, though they never explained who that was. Ronin didn't push. He knew what it was like to run. He had been running from his own memories for 20 years. The diner, usually empty and cold, started to feel different. When the kids were there, the silence wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. Jory would draw pictures on the napkins with a burnt stick. Kale would help Ronin peel vegetables, standing on a crate to reach the counter. Alara would keep watch at the window, her protective instinct never fading. One afternoon, Ronin was teaching Kale how to knead dough. The boy's small violet hands were covered in white flour, and for the first time, Ronin heard him laugh. It was a bright musical sound. You're doing it wrong, kid, Ronin grumbled, though a smile tugged at the corner of his beard under the gruff exterior. You have to push with the heel of your hand. Like this. Like this, Ronin, Kale asked, mimicking the giant man. Better, Ronin nodded. You keep that up, I'll have to put you on the payroll. Alara turned from the window. We cannot stay long today, she said, her voice tight. The patrols are heavier. Ronin wiped his hands. Sector security? No, Alara said darkly. Others? They wear the crest of the inner systems. Ronin frowned. Inner system crests meant high-level politics. It meant trouble far above the pay grade of a slum cook. You're safe here, Ronin said firmly. This place is reinforced steel, old military surplus container. Nobody gets in unless I let them. They have scanners, Alara said, trembling. If they find us, they won't, Ronin interrupted. He reached under the counter and pulled out a fresh apple pie. Steam still rising from the vents in the crust. Now dessert first today, Jory's favorite. The tension in the room broke as Jory gasped in delight. For an hour, the world outside didn't exist. There was just the smell of cinnamon and the sound of children eating in safety. But peace in Sector 4 was always on a timer. 3 days later, the timer ran out. It was raining again. A violent storm that shook the metal walls of the diner. The lunch rush, which consisted of 3 factory workers, had just left. The kids were in the back booth, finishing their soup. Suddenly, the front door didn't just open. It exploded inward. 2 figures in black tactical armor stepped through the smoke. They weren't local police. They held plasma rifles, high-grade military tech that cost more than Ronin's entire building. Their helmets were sleek and faceless. Alara screamed and shoved her brothers under the table. Ronin didn't flinch. He stood behind the counter, a cleaning rag in his hand, his eyes instantly shifting from cook to soldier. Kitchen's closed, Ronin said, his voice low and dangerous. One of the soldiers stepped forward, scanning the room with a red laser grid. The laser stopped on the back booth. Target located, the soldier said, his voice a digitized growl. Secure the assets. Eliminate the witness. Ronin dropped the rag. I said, Ronin repeated, stepping out from behind the counter. The kitchen is closed. The soldier aimed his rifle at Ronin. Stand down, citizen. This is Imperial business. This is my diner, Ronin replied. The soldier fired. A bolt of blue plasma screamed across the room. But Ronin wasn't there anymore. Despite his size, he moved with a speed that defied logic. He slid over the counter, grabbing a heavy cast iron skillet as he moved. The plasma bolt scorched the wall where his head had been a second ago. Ronin closed the distance. He swung the skillet with the force of a hydraulic press. Clang! The iron met the soldier's helmet, shattering the visor and sending the armored man flying backward into the wall. The second soldier turned, aiming at the children. No! Ronin roared. He threw a knife, his favorite chef's knife, across the room. It struck the soldier's rifle barrel, sparking and jamming the weapon. The soldier fumbled, reaching for a sidearm. Ronin tackled him. They crashed into a table, splintering wood and metal. Ronin took a punch to the jaw that would have knocked out a normal man. But he just grunted. He grabbed the soldier by the chest plate and hurled him through the diner's front window, out into the rainy street. Ronin stood up, breathing heavily. Blood trickled from his lip. He turned to the kids. "Back room, now," he commanded. "Ronin," Alara cried, terrified. "They will bring more." "I know," Ronin said, grabbing a hidden shotgun from under the register. "Go lock the door. Don't open it until I say my name." He pushed a heavy vending machine in front of the broken door. He checked his ammo. He was an old man, tired and worn out, but he felt more alive than he had in years. He wasn't fighting for a flag or a paycheck anymore. He was fighting for Jory's laugh. He was fighting for Alara's bravery. Outside, the sound of heavy engines filled the air. Not a car, a ship. Floodlights blinded him through the broken window. A voice boomed from loudspeakers, shaking the diner's foundation. "Surrender the royal heirs. This is your final warning." Ronin spit blood onto the floor. "Royal heirs," he muttered to himself. "I thought they were just hungry." He pumped the shotgun. He walked out into the rain, standing alone in front of his shattered diner. Above him, a sleek, massive warship hovered, its engines burning the air with ozone. Dozens of soldiers were rappelling down, surrounding him. Red laser sights dotted his chest like a rash. A ramp descended from the ship. A woman walked down. She didn't wear armor. She wore a flowing gown of liquid silver that seemed to repel the rain. Her skin was the same violet as the children's, but her eyes were cold, hard diamonds. She wore a crown of woven starlight. She was the High Sovereign Valera, the ruler of the Galactic Concordat, the woman who commanded fleets that burned stars. She stopped 10 feet from Ronin. Her guards raised their weapons, ready to vaporize him. Ronin didn't lower his gun. "You have something of mine, human," Valera said, her voice smooth and terrifying. "I have 3 scared kids," Ronin growled. "If they're yours, you did a terrible job looking after them." The guards gasped. A collective click of weapons priming filled the air. Nobody spoke to the Sovereign like that. Valera's eyes narrowed. "You dare judge me? I am fighting a war on 3 fronts to ensure their future." They ran away. They were lost. "They were starving," Ronin shouted, his voice cracking with anger. "They were eating garbage in the rain. While you were fighting your war, your son was shaking from the cold. While you were conquering systems, your daughter was begging for bread." Valera stiffened. "I provided them with the best synthetic nutrition. The safest bunkers. They didn't need nutrition." Ronin stepped forward, ignoring the lasers aimed at his heart. They needed a home. They needed someone to look at them and see children, not heirs. He pointed the shotgun at the ground, but his eyes drilled into the Empress. "You want them?" Ronin asked softly. "You can take them. You have the guns. But ask yourself, why did they run to a dump like this? Why did they choose a broke, ugly human chef over a palace?" Valera stared at him. For the first time, the diamond-hard look in her eyes cracked. She looked at the shabby diner. She smelled the faint scent of apple pie drifting out the broken window. "Alara!" Ronin shouted without turning around. "Open the door!" The back door creaked open. Alara, Kale, and Jory stepped out into the rain. They didn't run to their mother. They ran to Ronin. Jory grabbed Ronin's leg, burying his face in the chef's dirty apron. Alara stood beside him, glaring at the soldiers. "Don't hurt him!" Alara screamed at her mother. "He fed us! He saved us!" The Sovereign looked at her children. She saw them clinging to this rough, bloodied human. She saw Jory holding onto Ronin's leg as if it was the only sturdy thing in the universe. Valera raised her hand. "Lower weapons!" "But Sovereign," a guard started. "Lower them!" she commanded. The soldiers lowered their rifles. The rain continued to fall, sizzling on the hot pavement. Valera walked forward slowly. She stopped in front of Ronin. She looked down at Jory, then up at the chef. "What did you feed them?" she asked quietly. "Stew," Ronin said. "And toast and apple pie." "Apple pie?" She repeated the words as if they were alien. "Yeah, it's warm, it's sweet. It makes you feel safe," Ronin said. Valera looked at Ronin's hands capable of violence, clearly, but currently resting gently on Alara's shoulder. "I have commanded armies," Valera whispered. "I have negotiated peace treaties between star systems, but my children have never looked at me the way they look at you." She kneeled down in the mud, her silver gown stained with the filth of Sector 4. She looked Jory in the eye. "Are you safe here, my little star?" she asked her son. Jory nodded. "Ronin makes the bad dreams go away, and the soup is magic." Valera closed her eyes. A single tear, silver and bright, rolled down her cheek. She stood up and looked at Ronin. The coldness was gone. I thought I was protecting them by keeping them in a fortress, she said. I see now that a fortress is not a home. She signaled her guards. We are leaving. Mother? Valera asked, confused. You will stay here, Valera said firmly. For now. I have a war to finish, and it seems you are in better hands here than in the palace. She turned to Ronin. She reached into her robe and pulled out a heavy medallion, stamped with the royal crest. She placed it on the counter of the broken window. This grants you imperial immunity, she said. No one in this galaxy will dare touch this establishment again. You have the protection of the High Fleet. Ronin looked at the medallion, then at the kids. I don't need a fleet. I just need a new window. Valera smiled, a rare, genuine smile. You shall have it. And supplies. The best ingredients in the sector. On one condition. What's that? Ronin asked. Next time I visit, the Sovereign said. Save a slice of this apple pie for me. With a nod, she turned and walked back to her ship. The engines roared, and the vessel ascended into the clouds, taking the threat and the noise with it. Silence returned to the street. Ronin looked down at the three kids. Well, Ronin sighed, holstering his shotgun. Drafty in here now. Who wants hot chocolate? Jory cheered. Valera smiled, her shoulders finally relaxing. 6 months later, the rusty spoon wasn't rusty anymore. It had been renovated, expanded, and was always full. Not just with factory workers, but with diplomats, travelers, and curious locals. But the back booth was always reserved. Every day at noon, 3 Lyrian children sat there, and occasionally, a woman in a hooded cloak would join them, eating simple beef stew with a golden spoon, listening to an old human chef tell stories about the old days. Ronin wasn't just a lonely cook anymore. He was a guardian. He was a father. And as he watched Alara laugh at one of his bad jokes, he realized something. He hadn't just saved them, they had saved him. If this story warmed your heart, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us share more stories like this. And I want to ask you, do you think family is about blood, or is it about who shows up when you need them most? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.